Just before we get into this video, I want to start it off by saying I am by no means a super unicum. I am not the best player in World of Tanks. I know the basics, I'm a little bit above average in WN8 if you want to count that, but I'm by no means one of these top level players. Having said all of that, Ranked is meant to be this game mode where the best players can show off their skill to the rest of the world, but it's not. Ranked is the most RNG based game mode I've ever seen. As it is on the EU server, which is the server that I play on, I don't know about every other server, but for the EU, the ranked game mode is basically decided before we even get into the game. So it's either a 15-0 victory or a 15-0 loss. That is basically what happens within the ranked game mode. And you are either very much on the winning team or the losing team, and the game is decided before we even get into the actual battle. Why is this? Well, this isn't just to do with ranked. Random battles on the EU server are horribly unbalanced. Most of the games only last about 3 minutes on average. And considering that a few years back, you know, average games were lasting about 6-7 minutes. Now they're lasting 3. We've over half that time for an average game of World of Tanks. What's happened? Well, what's happened is that there's been loads and loads of tier 10 tanks that have been added into the game that are super better than the other tanks that are already in there. Compare these tanks. The Object 279E, 260, IS-7, 277, 430U and 268 version 4. All Russian tanks. Compare that to an IS-4, which is also a Russian tank. Yeah, which one would you rather drive? Any of the others or the IS-4? Yep, any of the others. And it's like, the IS-7 is one of the oldest tanks in the game, and it's still somewhat playable. Okay, the gun isn't up to quite the standard of the other tanks, but it's still a good enough tank to play with. The fact is that nowadays World of Tanks, you need so much penetration to go through stuff that you're almost resorting to fire heat rounds at everything because you need that extra pen. Like, I don't understand how some tanks have sub 250 pen at tier 10 for their standard rounds. Honestly, you need at least 270mm of pen in nowadays World of Tanks, and that's in my opinion. Unless you are going to get the side of a tank or behind it, you don't really stand a chance with 250. There are very few tanks in the game now that we actually meet that have weak points that are around 250mm thick. I mean, sure, the Type 5 Heavy, it got nerfed, and then, you know, it does have kind of weak points now that you can pen. But even then, it's still hard because the Type 5 Heavy still needs to be angled in a certain way for you to hit it. So, yeah, it's all over the place at the moment with the balancing of the games. And the fact is that everyone is firing heat rounds and premium rounds, and that's in the normal game mode. Now, when you're coming into, say, a ranked game, yeah, you should be firing heat and premium rounds no matter what. If you're not firing premium rounds, you know, if you're firing heat, obviously you want to switch to AP if you're going to permatrack someone, or switch to HE if you want to reset the cap or something. I don't know, because that's what Wargaming want you to do with HE. But those types of games, or this game mode, ranked, you need premium rounds to penetrate some of these tanks. And I'm looking at the Chieftain. Like, even with premium rounds, you can't really pen it that reliably. You're going to need about 300mm of pen to go through the hull armor if you're like kind of head on. And I'm not talking about the lower plate of, well, you know, the lower plate that, well, it has half a lower plate. That's about 140mm thick. You know, you could go through that with a tier 6 tank. It doesn't matter. The Chieftain is an absolutely crap vehicle when it comes to an incompetent player. Literally, a noob, if he's driving the Chieftain, will die. It's so easy to kill a Chieftain if a player doesn't know how to drive it. But this is where the problem lies. Ranked is for the best players. The best players know how to drive this tank. And once you see a competent player in a Chieftain, it's almost unstoppable. Almost. I mean, you could just HE it to death, but you know, not everyone fires an unlimited number of HE rounds, as much as Wargaming thinks that happens. But that's besides the point. The Chieftain is completely broken when it comes to being a hold-down tank. The Cupola is very, very small. Yes, you can hit it. And yes, okay, that's kind of a little bit of a balancing factor. And yes, people have spent so long to try and get that tank. I agree. It shouldn't be removed. It should be kept exactly how it is. The problem being, though, is that when you get into a ranked game mode and your team doesn't have a Chieftain and they have a Chieftain, or their Chieftain gets matched up with an IS-4 on your team, for example, that is not so fun when you have a Chieftain versus an IS-4 in the matchmaker. Because the matchmaker just goes by, oh yeah, it's a heavy tank. There you go. Have a Chieftain, have an IS-4. No, that's not exactly how it works. It's the same as if you match up a 277 with a Type 5 heavy. They're completely different. It doesn't make sense. Or an E100 and an IS-7. It doesn't make sense. One is a super heavy, one is just a normal heavy. Like, why does the matchmaker still do this? It worked when it was back in, 2015 or whatever, when we had basically kind of similar, like each tank had their weakness and you could kill it. But nowadays, no. What are you going to do? Okay, 279E and Chieftain, yeah, okay, they can be matched up against each other. I would argue that the 279E is better in a normal random game mode. However, in ranked, Chieftains should be matched up with Chieftains, no matter what, because there's hardly anything you can do to a hold down Chieftain, as we've already established. I mean, the closest thing that you're going to get to a Chieftain in the tech tree is an IS-7, and even then, it just envies the Chieftain's turret. The Chieftain's turret, you need about 400mm all over-ish. There is a few weak points, but they're kind of pixel shots that you can't always hit. You need about 350-ish pen to go and pen an IS-7's turret. So straight away, you're going to notice, yeah, that's a bit of a difference. Yes, Jagdpanzer E100 firing 420 heat can pen a Chieftain's turret. But that's still only about a 60-70% chance. So it could still ricochet. However, if an IS-7 is up against an E100 firing heat, yeah, it's more like an 80-90% chance that it was going to pen. Not to mention the IS-7 is lower down, so it's going to have an easier impact angle. There's lots of players out there that are saying, oh yeah, well, let's just make it tech tree only. And I do agree, but at the same time, that's a massive kick in the balls to anyone that's grinded up and gone into Clan Wars. Every day they've grinded their way at Clan Wars. From 6 till 9 at night. That's a long time to be grinding a tank or to be grinding Clan Wars with your team. And then at the end of it, you get rewarded with the tank that you wanted. It's not easy. Not everyone can get a Clan Wars reward tank. And I understand the people that are saying, okay, but, they want to be playing Clan Wars, they shouldn't be allowed to do it in this one. I do agree, but I do disagree as well. Because this is kind of like the almost esports game mode. Ranked battles is as close as a normal person is going to get to an esports kind of area. And that is going to be, playing whatever tank you can or playing whatever tank you're best in. And if you're then restricted to a tank that you don't want to play, yeah, how are you meant to perform to be your best and show off to the world that you're the best player in this tank or the best player in one of the tanks if you can't even use the tank that you want the most, like the Chieftain? So I understand, and I do agree with Clan Wars players that are saying, like, we earned this tank, I want to bloody well use it. And yeah, I agree. But the main issue is when you're matching up a Chieftain against a tank that is just vastly inferior to it. So, I mean, at least have a table of contents where the tanks that can be matched up against a Chieftain is very limited. For example, it could only be matched up against tanks that are very similar to it. Itself and maybe a 279E or any other tank that you could think of that is kind of overpowered. And yeah, let's not mix our words. 279E and Chieftain are overpowered tanks. The 907, the 430U, they're killable. They are killable. If you're in a Chieftain though and you hold down, good luck. As I've said, it's nearly impossible. 279E, you need to fire premium rounds. That's why I say it's overpowered. It's not as overpowered as the Chieftain is in ranked. However, yes, the 279E is still very, very hard to kill, even with heat, and you've got to find that right angle to actually kill it. So that's why I say the 279E is overpowered as well as the Chieftain. But yeah, it's just finding that kind of matchmaker experience where both of the tanks are going to meet each other. The next thing I wanted to address is this bullshit experience bonus that you're getting. Who came up with this? Not only does it just make people go hold down like a Chieftain, you have a Chieftain, that's a better tank, more XP for you. It's actually as simple as that. If you're in a Chieftain, you go hold down, you're going to bounce basically everything, and you then get bonus XP just for bouncing those shots. What? I don't understand how this makes it kind of balanced out. It should just be... I understand. It's trying to play the role of the tank. And yes, okay, that does kind of work. But at the same time, if you have a really good game and do lots of damage, sometimes, just because someone bounced more than you, suddenly comes above you. Like, what happened here? That's not right. That's not fair. Just because someone managed to bounce a Jagdpanzer E100 shell that was firing AP at him in a Chieftain that's hold down, and you're sitting there in your 277 and he penned you, it doesn't mean that he's a better player than you just because he's sitting there and just bouncing a shot every time that he fires. It doesn't make sense. You know, you could do 4,000 damage, he could do 3,000 damage. Because he bounced that shell, he comes above you. What? No. Why is that a thing? It shouldn't be a thing. It should just be exactly the same as the random battles. We don't need this stupid XP multiplier for whatever happens in the game. I understand why. I just don't like it. And I don't think that it needs to be in the game. Or at least not in this game mode. So there we go. That is why I don't think that the ranked game mode is so much dependent on skill rather than it's just RNG and who has the better tank. And yes, I understand that tanks are better than other tanks. In this game, yes, tanks are going to be better than others. But it's the fact when, you know, you don't have a good matchmaker and the game mode is meant to be on your skill. If you go into a 1v1, for example, in CSGO, you get given an AK or an M4, both of which are viable guns. One has its strength against the other. You know, they counter out each other, which is how it should be. It should be looking at the team list, and you have the counters for each tank. That's just how it works, and that's how it used to work. It used to be that you could counter that tank with that tank. You know, that tank would be better at something, but they're not as good as the other tank. You know, that's how it used to counter out each other. And if you're talking about ranked, it should be based against like CSGO in a 1v1. It should be a level playing field. It shouldn't be who has the better tank that is just better at everything than the other tank, and you have to try and basically work a hell of a lot harder just to get the same score or just below, and he's just sitting there and just breezing through everyone. Yeah, that's not really a show of skill. That's just who has the better tank. And that is why I kind of feel this way about the ranked game mode. So yeah, there you go. Leave a like, subscribe, you know what to do. I'll see you in a bit.
Машина уничтожена.